Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. It appears as though the UCP is backing down on a bill that would give it the power to fire mayors and councillors. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have the details. Following pressure from the BC government, Ottawa says British Columbia can now recriminalize drugs in public spaces. And the city of Lethbridge is looking into putting forth a bid for a prestigious curling event, the 2026 Scottish Tournament of Hearts.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, it looks like the Alberta government is backing down on its controversial Bill 20. That's the bill which would see the provincial cabinet have the power to fire municipal councillors and mayors. It would also force amendments or repeal bylaws that the province do not like. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson says this led to quite a bit of uproar from municipalities.
They're saying, look, we're a third level of government. Our councillors are elected by the people of wherever, so are the mayors. We are representing their will with these bylaws we're passing. And so they're saying, well, look, so why should the provincial cabinet be allowed to put a stop to that or get rid of these people that have been chosen by local voters? The other side of it is the UCP, the Conservatives, are unlikely to be in power forever in the provincial legislature. So what do you do if the New Democrats come to power and all of a sudden you have a bunch of Conservative mayors butting heads with them?
Legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will also have details of what a potential rail line running from Calgary to Edmonton would look like. That's coming up in the second half of our program. Former Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says it is a dangerous game the province is playing by overreaching into municipalities. He says it is more beneficial when governments come together and work together and not against each other.
When I was the mayor, we accessed federal funding, for example. They want to be involved in federal funding. They want to override municipal decisions. When I was the mayor, we accessed federal funding to expand our industrial park. And if we didn't have that kind of access support from the federal government, we would not have been able to attract Cavendish to our city. We would not have been able to enhance and modernize our airport. There are numerous other capital projects that we were able to do in the city of Lethbridge without raising municipal taxes because we got federal funding support, and all of that would go away. So I think that form of overreach is a problem. Overriding municipal council decisions, I think, is a problem. Firing the mayor and firing councillors from Edmonton, I think that is a big problem when they have been elected by the citizens of Lethbridge. So Bill 20 is a massive overreach. The other thing, as I've mentioned, is the interference in the voting system. We've had a voting system in the city of Lethbridge that has worked really well for 20 years using electronic votings. There has never been an issue with the outcome. There have been numerous issues in other municipalities with manual voting. It would increase our costs and it would be less reliable than the system we already have.
The town of Fort Macleod has a new councillor. The town held a by-election on Monday, and the winner was Jimit Patel. Patel won with 168 votes. The runner-up was Sidney Tobler with 106 votes. Voters went to the polls to replace the vacant seat left behind by Marco van Hugenbos, who stepped down earlier this year. Elections Alberta says the town of Fort Macleod has 2,470 eligible voters, and only 378 people, or 15%, turned out for the vote. The by-election's official results will come out on Friday. Alberta government officials are proposing new tools they say will increase affordable and attainable housing in towns and cities. Municipal Affairs Minister Rick McIver says recent changes will create more housing availability for all Albertans.
Through Bill 20, we are updating the Municipal Government Act to fully exempt non-profit, subsidized, affordable housing from municipal and education property taxes. This is a blanket property tax exemption for all nonprofit, subsidized, affordable housing in Alberta. Municipalities told me that they are interested in supporting affordable and attainable housing through taxation measures, and we will work with them so they understand which properties will qualify for this property tax exemption.
Well, the rainfall warning ended for our region on Wednesday. Jeanette Roche is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears the much-needed moisture may be leaving us fairly soon.
Yeah, true, Hal, but anyone traveling just a little south of us today saw some snowflakes earlier. That's right, about 5 centimeters of snow was expected along that U.S. border just south of Lethbridge today. Even Lethbridge got a little bit of rain earlier today, and then it all cleared up. And the good news, we are going to be seeing only partly cloudy skies overnight. The sky is going to clear up for a beautiful sunny day on a Thursday, and even though single-digit temperatures are going to change to double digits, we're looking at a high of 16 degrees on a Thursday, and I'll be back later in the show to tell you what a wonderful forecast we have in store over the next week.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the Trudeau government is just not worth the cost. During question period on Wednesday, Poilievre says under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Canadians simply cannot afford to keep up financially.
He's doubled the debt, doubled housing costs. He's increased spending by nearly 80%. What did we get for the money? The worst per person income growth in the entire G7 and the worst mortgage debt of all of those countries. When will he realize that the more he spends, the worse things get?
The Conservatives have been talking down the economy for a long time now without understanding that Canada has actually the strongest macroeconomic performance in the G7. And our perspective is to put that solid footing of the Government of Canada in service of Canadians by investing in housing, by investing in dental care, by investing in childcare, by investing in the supports that Canadians need in this difficult time. His solution is for governments to invest less in Canadians for ideological reasons, to be there less for people when they need it most.
The federal government says British Columbia can now recriminalize public drug use. Ottawa was asked by the BC government to scale back its drug decriminalization pilot program. Canada's mental health and addictions minister says the change takes effect immediately.
We've moved forward with BC on this with a clear lens on public health and public safety, because we know that we need to address the opioid crisis and the overdose deaths that we're seeing as a public health issue. This is a health crisis, not a criminal one. That being said, communities need to be safe. People need to have confidence that in their own communities they can move about freely and feel comfortable and engaged. But we also want to make sure that those who are using drugs also have safety and have healthcare services to support them so that we can save lives.
Members of BC's Sikh community gathered outside of a courthouse in Surrey, British Columbia, where 3 men accused of murdering temple leader Hardeep Singh Najjar made their first court appearance. The 3 suspects are all Indian nationals who face charges of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
It's completely understandable, given the context, why there's an enormous amount of community interest in this case. But that level of community interest makes me even more sort of resolved to ensure that those charged with these offenses have a fair trial. And I have no doubt that members of the East Indian community and the broader Canadian community and the international community are equally interested in ensuring that there is a fair trial, that justice is done.
Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Israel's invasion of Rafah is simply unacceptable, but she's holding out hope that a ceasefire will be in place fairly soon. The Israel Defense Forces have said that in order to wipe out the terrorist group Hamas, they must take out various Hamas battalions which are holed up in the city.
We've been following the negotiations, which are very fluid. We've been in contact with many officials on the Israeli side, on the Qatari side, on the Egyptian side, and we really hope that the negotiations are fruitful, because we need a ceasefire now. We need to make sure that hostages be released. We need humanitarian aid to go into Gaza. The violence must stop, and Hamas must lay down its weapons.
The Israel Defense Forces have begun their military operation in Rafah. Officials say the IDF has now seized control of the Gaza side of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt and is advancing along the Philadelphia corridor. TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto has more.
A new phase of the war opens. Let's dive into the details. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced shortly after the War Cabinet meeting on Monday evening that there had been a unanimous decision for Israel to continue the operation in Rafah. This is being done to exert military pressure on Hamas so they will release the Israeli hostages. Arab media portals began reporting in early morning hours that the IDF ground forces and tanks had begun to enter the eastern neighborhoods of Rafah, supported by artillery. The IDF spokesperson's unit confirmed the report and said that IDF forces are now operating against Hamas terrorists in Mizrach Rafah, the eastern part of Rafah. Palestinian media portals also reported that there had been clashes in the El Shuka area and around the Rafah crossing, and that there was tank fire and artillery shelling from the east.
A cargo ship loaded with humanitarian aid has left Cyprus for Gaza. Officials say the ship has 400 tons worth of food on it. The United Arab Emirates is partnering with an aid agency to send the crucial assistance to Gaza through the Israeli port of Ashdod. The ship's journey was expected to take around 30 hours to arrive. A UAE official says the aid would undergo Israeli security clearance upon arrival. It will then be loaded onto trucks and head south to the Kerem Shalom border crossing before arriving in Gaza. Closer to home, Lethbridge District Exhibition provides information on special events scheduled throughout the summer. Now, as usual, Whoop Up Days this year will celebrate summer by showcasing the best new and exciting features for 2024 from across southern Alberta. The Lethbridge and District Pro Rodeo and extensive Indigenous programming will highlight this event. Kim Gallucci, Executive Director of Lethbridge and District Exhibition, talks about how important it has been to work as a team to offer the very best to our community.
We've had the most or the highest turnout of people on board, sponsors to help support Whoop Up Days and make it a success than we've had in several years. So that's a great sign from the community that they really are excited about the festival. So we're able to do more, we're able to offer more, especially with the bands and different things for people. It also allows us to ensure that we have different areas covered, and just the costs have come up or increased in security and that. So we wanted to be a secure, fun, exciting environment for families and public and visitors. And by doing this, we were able to accommodate all of those things.
Really, since January, we've been going hard on trying to get our lineup, entertainment, attractions, everything in order. Our team has been working like crazy to try to get everything done, and we've been thrilled with what we've been able to pull together. The musical entertainment that we're able to add again this year, the new rides from West Coast Amusement Midway, the new Family Fun Zone. We have all kinds of new things that we're introducing.
The Summer Whoop Up Days will take place August 20th through the 24th, and it's always a great time. Executive Director of the LDE, Kim Gallucci, also discussed his group's deficit. City officials say it is now over $750,000 as of March the 31st. That is up from just over $341,000 reported at the end of February.
Well, definitely with the city's assistance, things are really shaping up. We're on the right track. The revenues are up. We're generating more than we anticipated initially. We're starting to streamline our costs. We're able to invest in some areas that you probably saw. We started to redo the parking lot, actually put lines in so people can know where to park, and really fix some of the holes. There's some holes, and make it a great place to come stop and visit. We're going to be doing a number of other initiatives to try incorporate other pieces. So the city has really stepped up to make it a very operational venue.
Gallucci says events like Whoop Up Days and the Agri-Food Innovation Expo coming to Lethbridge in November will help bring in more revenue for his group. The city of Lethbridge is looking into potentially bidding for the 2026 Scotties Tournament of Hearts. The Lethbridge Curling Club was looking for a letter of support and $400,000 in financial aid to bid for this prestigious curling event. City Council voted to allocate $330,000 from the Municipal Revenue Stabilization Reserve and $70,000 from the city's major event hosting grant to help with the bid. Lethbridge previously hosted the Scotties back in 1987 and 2007. There was a lot more activity than usual at McDonald's locations across Canada on Wednesday. People lined up to satisfy their McCravings while supporting a worthwhile cause. BCN's Naveen Day has that story.
You know, if you're experiencing a Big Mac attack, Wednesday, May 8th is a great day to have one. It is McHappy Day. So if you are planning to hit the Golden Arches for some 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, or any other item, your purchase helps support families with sick children.
At Ronald McDonald House Charities, we support families with sick and injured children. And our relationship with McDonald's is a huge part of why we're able to stay open. So McHappy Day is such a big part of that, and we're so grateful and so excited to be here and to be a part of it. So we want to say to everybody, come down and pick up some McDonald's. A portion of the proceeds goes towards supporting families that need to travel for medical treatment.
Here in Lethbridge at the Scenic Drive location, the preparations for the important day, including decorating, took days to plan and execute, and donations started coming in more than 2 weeks ago.
We have right now is our banners. We also made some of our balloon stands as well, which took a lot of balloons actually. We have been doing donations throughout more or less 2-3 weeks, and you can see the hearts already on the walls. We sold out of socks actually. So yeah, it's pretty much exciting.
Last year, McHappy Day raised over $7.5 million in support of Ronald McDonald House Charities and local children's charities. This year marks the 30th McHappy Day. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Now, I am having a Big Mac attack. Thanks so much, Naveen. Teachers in Saskatchewan are set to begin voting this week on an offer from the province for a new collective agreement. The Saskatchewan government is offering wage increases and a commitment to honor promises of more funding for classrooms. Teachers have been refusing for months to volunteer for lunchroom supervision and after-school events to push government officials to negotiate. You know, for the first time in its 114-year history, the Boy Scouts of America is changing its name. The Texas-based organization says it's ready to become Scouting America in a new rebranding.
I've had a lot of trouble in the past explaining to people that I'm not exactly part of the Girl Scouts program, but I'm part of Scouts BSA. Scouting America sounds a lot more inclusive of all of the other people that are in Scouting.
I think it sends this really strong message to everyone in America that they can come to this program, they can bring their authentic self, they can be who they are, right, and they will be welcomed here.
The rainfall warning has ended for much of southwestern Alberta, but we've seen quite a bit of precipitation lately. Will it continue? A full look at the weather picture is on deck. It was mostly cloudy and rainy again today across much of southwestern Alberta, but things are about to change. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, you're saying I won't have to put up with a wet Dexter soon? I mean, these soggy walks are smelling up the house thanks to our wet puppy dog here.
Yeah, wet dog smell, not exactly the greatest, but the good news for little Dexter and for your nose, I guess, Hal, is that we are seeing mainly clear skies throughout the next week. We are seeing a beautiful forecast. Actually, that rain ended earlier today, 16 for a high on Thursday. Look at these temperatures as we get closer to the weekend there. 21 for a high on Friday, up to 24 on Saturday, all the way up to 26 for Sunday and into Monday as well. And then rounding out that 7-day forecast at 23 degrees, which is much more like it. So average high for this time of year, 17 degrees. We're going to be well above that very soon. Average low, 3 degrees. 30 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1987, and the record low was -4 on this day, happening in 1943. Sun rose this morning at 5:55, and our sun set this evening at 9:01. We're now seeing 15 hours and just a little over 15 hours. It's about 4 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. 21 for a high in Victoria tomorrow with clear skies. Could see some winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait and some onshore winds as well, making that temperature feel more like about 15 degrees by the water. 19 for a high in Vancouver with clear skies, and clear skies across Alberta tomorrow too. 19 is the expected high in Edmonton, and Calgary looking at a high of 18 degrees tomorrow. As we get to the rest of the prairies, we're also seeing beautiful sunshine and some lovely double digits, even some 20s here. So Saskatoon sitting at 20 degrees tomorrow. Expected high tomorrow in Regina, 19, and 23 is what Winnipeg can expect tomorrow as well, with gorgeous sunshine as well. Mix of sun and cloud tomorrow expected in Toronto, 15 the high there, 16 in Ottawa, and a lovely 17 degrees in Montreal with scattered clouds. And as we get to Atlantic Canada, this is where we see more precipitation. So we're expecting 2 millimeters of rain, which will be ending in the afternoon in Fredericton, 8 degrees for a high. Halifax sitting at 8 degrees tomorrow and seeing 5 millimeters of rain, and then 2 to 4 millimeters expected in Charlottetown tomorrow with a high of 6 degrees and 11 for an expected high. And St. John's with a mix of sun and clouds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca is pulling its COVID-19 vaccine from the European market. The regulator said the approval for the vaccine to be withdrawn came at the request of the marketing authorization holder. AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine was first given the nod by the European Medicines Agency back in January of 2021. Within weeks, however, concerns grew about the vaccine safety when a number of countries suspended the vaccine's use when rare blood clots were detected in a small number of immunized people. The EU regulator concluded that AstraZeneca's shot did not raise the risk of clots, but doubts still remained. Safety regulators in the United States want Tesla to explain how it developed the fix for its autopilot, partially automated driving system after recalling more than 2 million vehicles. Investigators with the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have concerns about whether the recall remedy actually worked. Tesla has reported 20 crashes since the software update was first issued in December. Investigators say they could not find a difference between warnings to the driver to pay attention before and after the recall fix was sent out. Swedish manufacturer Northvolt AB says homemade bombs have been found at the Quebec construction site of its major plant for electric vehicle batteries. Co-founder Paolo Cerruti says company employees discovered bombs had been placed under machinery over the weekend at the site located east of Montreal. He says there was clear intent to harm workers, and the company has contacted police. The $7 billion project has faced opposition from environmental groups and the Mohawk community. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 31 points on the day to finish at 22,259. The Dow was up 172 points to 39,056. The S&P 500 was down just under half point today to 5187, and the Nasdaq was down 29 points to 16,302. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 83 cents to 79.21 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to 2.18 US. Gold was down 5.25 on the day to 23.0885 US an ounce, and silver was up 9 cents to 27.33 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.14 per bushel, barley's at $6.42, canola's at $14.13, and corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was down $1.15 to $176.48. Feeder cattle were down $1.95 to $244.20, and lean hogs were unchanged at $92.53. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.87 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, it appears as though the Alberta government is backing down a little bit from its controversial Bill 20. That's the bill which would see the provincial cabinet have the power to fire municipal councillors and mayors. It would also force amendments or repeal bylaws that the province simply did not like. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will join us shortly from Edmonton to talk more about Bill 20. He'll also have more details of how the province is preparing for a possible drought to help various communities. That's coming up momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. You know, even though we've seen quite a bit of rain lately here in Alberta, it's been a fairly dry spring. The province has been preparing for a potential drought this summer. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joins us once again from Edmonton. Tyler, a major water sharing agreement was announced last month by the UCP. Now, if we have a drought this summer, will it actually be enough?
Well, that's sort of what the water sharing agreement is designed to address. Now, there's 5 stages to the water management drought sort of situation. If we get to stage 5, we're in a state of emergency. At this point, we're in a stage 4. So this is the point where, there are risks posed to agriculture, to livestock, to the economy, obviously, if there's going to be crop failures, things like that. So we're at the point where the government's been talking about this for months. They've been in negotiations since about, I think, late January is when they started on water sharing agreements. And what that amounts to basically is along the river basin, sort of in southern Alberta, you have various water holders. And so some of the biggest license holders, the ones that get to take the most water, so they've basically agreed to voluntarily use the minimum necessary to make sure that there's water for other users. And municipalities, we've seen some voluntarily. For example, Calgary has said they're not going to be washing municipal vehicles as much to try and save water. These are the sort of things that are happening across the province. You have irrigation districts, for example, setting lower rates of irrigation for some farmers in their districts, which, less than previous years, so not ideal for farmers, but enough to try and make sure there's enough to go around. Now, there's also a much larger water management plan that the government has released. So this has actually been really front of mind for the UCP for the last several months. I mean, I think not that many people maybe pay attention to water and water usage and things like that, but it is something that the government has very, very actively been keeping an eye on as reservoir levels have been very low. There's not been that much snow over the winter. Certainly, as you mentioned, the rain is going to help. But it's sort of unlikely that it's even possible to see enough rain to sort of get us back to where we might want to be, or where we would have been a couple of years ago. The sponge of the sort of water system in Alberta has dried out quite a bit over the last couple of years.
Wow. Tyler, the province also announced a new committee to study ways to really clean up tailings ponds more quickly. Now, the ponds are hazardous leftover water from the oil sands extraction process, and many would argue pose a significant environmental hazard.
Yeah, and obviously these are the images that don't do great for Alberta's PR internationally when photos of tailings ponds go around and activists talk about it. So there has been this committee that's been struck to study the issue. Not really much of a timeline on when they're planning to report back, but certainly these are, and they're often in the vicinity of environmentally significant areas or delicate areas and things like that. Of course, there have been stories over the years of tailings ponds leaking into water, into rivers, and things like that. So, it's a big PR thing in addition to being, a genuine problem for the environment, a genuine problem for industry. So this committee aims to, what are some of the ways this can be dealt with more quickly to prevent their further expansion and things like that. And so, a little bit controversial in the sense that you do have some environmental activists saying, well, look, this has been studied for years and years and years. We have ideas on what to do. Perhaps the issue is that there just needs to be more effort into doing it. So, I don't imagine this is going to be a massive controversy, but it certainly will be interesting to see what the committee comes up with when they report back down the line when it comes to the tailings ponds, because, of course, the oil sands industry is not going anywhere anytime soon, and that means neither are the tailings ponds until some sort of cleanup is started.
Yeah, it's a big moneymaker for our province here, definitely, oil and gas sector. Tyler, the UCP also announced that they're looking into expanding rail service in our province, including an Edmonton to Calgary rail line, which would be kind of cool, and a train that would run out to Banff and Jasper. Now, the study alone, however, is going to cost taxpayers around $9 million. Now, what would a project like that potentially cost? How many billions of dollars? And will we see even a referendum on it?
Yeah, well, Devin Dreeshen, the transportation minister, when this was announced, didn't even put a dollar figure on it. He said billions and billions. He said this is one of, if not the largest infrastructure project in Alberta's history that's being contemplated right now. As for a referendum, that's a good question. There's been no word on a referendum. At this point, basically, they had this sort of vision. Premier Danielle Smith is a fan of this idea, and so they're going to be doing this feasibility study, as you say, a $9 million study. Now, I went right down in the weeds of Alberta's history with passenger rail studies. It's happened a pile of times: 1976, 1985, 1986, 1985, 2004, 2008, 2010, 2014 were the years that this has previously been studied. And obviously it has not happened. We have not had intercity rail transit since the Dayliner shut down between Edmonton and Calgary in 1986. So there's a long history of this. We've tried thinking about it, talking about it. Shovels have never gotten the ground. Will it be different this time? Who knows? But the possibility here is that there could be shovels in the ground as early as 2027. So I don't know. It's really tough to say because I know I'm rambling on about this, but I'm excited about it because I was reading so much about it. The part of the trouble here is where are you going to run that train? There's a Canadian Pacific line between Edmonton and Calgary. Do you just toss a passenger train on that? Or are you going to build a completely separate line to try and have super high-speed rail between the cities? What's the cost going to look like? What are the negotiations with rural landowners and First Nations groups? There's, the issues that go into this are just innumerable in many ways. So having looked at the old reports, I'm now very curious to see what this feasibility study is going to say when they're all done and when it's released publicly.
It'll take quite a while as well. Government officials said take at least 15 years to get a project like this completed.
Yeah, because they're also looking at the population projections because you need a certain population basically to sustain high-speed rail. There's the reason it works in Europe and Asia as opposed to like here. So they're looking at sort of the population projections for around 2050, thinking that might be about the time there'd be enough people. So, we all might be relatively old by the time this gets done.
It's funny though. I was thinking if somebody lived in Red Deer and they wanted to work in Calgary or Edmonton, it would be apropos. It would be wonderful, right? I'm also thinking about the GO train service in Southern Ontario that I used over and over again. When I lived in Hamilton, you could take it all the way to Toronto, and it connects all points in between. So, yeah, I mean, if the GO train service works in Ontario, I wonder if we'd see something similar to that right here in Alberta, right? Now, it appears as though the province has backed down on its controversial Bill 20, Tyler. The bill would have given the provincial cabinet the power to fire municipal councillors and mayors. It would also force amendments or repeal bylaws that the province did not like. Now, this led to quite a bit of uproar from municipalities.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, of course. They're saying, look, we're a third level of government. Our councillors are elected by the people of wherever. So are the mayors. We are representing their will with these bylaws we're passing. And so they're saying, well, look, so why should the provincial cabinet be allowed to put a stop to that or get rid of these people that have been chosen by local voters? So super controversial, obviously. And the provincial government has backed down to some extent. What they've said is, look, we've heard that this is controversial and we're willing to take suggestions on amendments to the legislation. Now, the provincial government, Rick McIver, the municipal affairs minister, they have said that these are the sorts of powers they're reserving for extenuating circumstances. They're perhaps not likely to come fire Mayor Amarjeet Sohi or Mayor Jyoti Gondek because they're, more progressive politicians. They'd be looking at some sort of malfeasance and things like that. But still, you can still understand why local politicians would not be super keen on this level of scrutiny. And of course, the other side of it is the UCP, the Conservatives, are unlikely to be in power forever in the provincial legislature. So what do you do if the New Democrats come to power and all of a sudden you have a bunch of Conservative mayors butting heads with them? So super controversial. I think we're going to keep hearing about this because not only is it really interesting, but it's also just, every mayor in the province is mad about it. Like I don't know if there's any mayor or councillor who would support such a thing. So it's a really, really interesting sort of intergovernment dynamic. And for once, the UCP is not just fighting with Ottawa.
It's funny, you reminded me of that recall legislation that, Landon Johnston, I believe, that Calgary businessman, he ended up getting, around 75,000 signatures, a far cry from the 500,000. But he says it still sends a powerful message to Mayor Jyoti Gondek in Calgary and City Council.
Exactly. And, and that recall legislation has been used. It was used in one or two much smaller municipalities than Calgary. So that, there is sort of some of these other democratic mechanisms for removing politicians if they go too far. But of course, that's, I think, a little bit different than cabinet making that decision.
Tyler, the Alberta government is looking at overhauling our province's auto insurance program. It released 2 studies and is doing a public consultation on what Albertans are looking for when it comes to our auto insurance. What did the studies reveal?
Well, basically, they looked at what some of the options might be. And there are essentially 3 options, which are options that other provinces have. Alberta has a fully private auto insurance scheme. Quebec has a mixed private-public scheme. BC has a public scheme. I think Saskatchewan and Manitoba might have public auto insurance as well. And so this all sort of goes back to this idea that Alberta has really, really expensive auto insurance compared to other places, that it's, there's reports every once in a while saying it's, among the most expensive in the country. So this is, looking at the affordability crisis, where can the government sort of step in to reduce expenses for people in the province? And this is one of the things they're looking at. So they've also announced a freeze on the auto insurance rate hike. I think about 3.5% will be the cap put on that. But it seems to be for good drivers, is sort of what they've hinted. So I guess we'll see perhaps what that means. So they're going to be seeking feedback to see what people want, because what this is all coming to at this point is you can't have everything. You might be able to have lower rates, but coverage or injury payouts or something might change like that, or you could have higher rates, better coverage. So it's going to be a real weighing of values, or the values that Albertans have regarding their auto insurance. This was in the mandate letter to, I think, Nathan Neudorf, the utilities minister. And so certainly we're going to hear more about it. Maybe not the world's most exciting issue, but certainly something that people might notice in their checkbooks when things actually change.
A little extra money for us is good, definitely, in our pocketbooks. Tyler, the Alberta NDP leadership race is ongoing. The party's choosing Rachel Notley's successor on June the 22nd, and I believe the next debate is coming up Saturday in Calgary. So who's the front runner right now? Is it Naheed Nenshi, the former Calgary mayor?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Part of the struggle that the candidates for this leadership have had is just name recognition, fundamentally. Some of the early polling basically showed that these people were not really known outside of their home communities, which for most of them, except for Nenshi and Kathleen Ganley, is Edmonton. So, they have to obviously appeal to New Democratic Party members in Lethbridge and Medicine Hat and Calgary and wherever. So that has been a real challenge, I think, for some of these other candidates, where Nenshi has this name recognition across the province because of his time as Calgary mayor, because of his response to the 2013 floods. So the name recognition has been a big part. So that, I think, is probably in many ways why people are thinking of Naheed Nenshi as the front runner candidate. Sarah Hoffman, I have thought, is putting up a very strong fight against him. There has certainly been some criticism of Nenshi as sort of a late entrant to the NDP party. The NDP being, of course, a progressive party. Nenshi, of course, sort of trying to cast himself as a post-partisan politician, neither red nor blue. So there's identity questions circulating for the party. There's this issue of brand identity. What is this party after Rachel Notley? I think it's fair to say Nenshi's the front runner, but whoever wins this thing, I think, is going to have some pretty big questions of, party cohesion, of their affiliation with the federal NDP, and of, just what is this party after Rachel Notley? So it's going to be very interesting keeping an eye on them for the next, 6 or so months, I think.
And didn't Nenshi also mention if you mix the red and the blue, you get purple, which is his favorite color too, right?
It is his favorite color. And you know what? But I don't know if you get purple if you mix blue and orange. So the analogy maybe almost doesn't quite work for Alberta.
We're still awaiting a survey information on the Alberta pension plan, Tyler. Reporters have been fighting via access to information legislation, but to no avail. The UCP says that Albertans would walk away with, 53% of the CPP?
That was their initial sales pitch. Yeah, last fall it must have been when they came out with that big report saying if Alberta left the CPP, took our money with us, we'd have like 53% of it, and it would be a very robust pension fund. Of course, this was super controversial. The NDP jumped all over it. Both federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre and federal Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau have said no, please don't leave the CPP. This we're stronger together, all that sort of stuff. And the UCP's wouldn't say they've backed off of it, but it certainly has not taken up that much of their time in the last few months because it is really controversial. It's not necessarily a massive vote getter or winner, but there's been this attempt by reporters to get, basically more information. What information is the government receiving from Albertans and what are they doing with that information? And it's just they haven't released this stuff. There's various exceptions. We don't need to get into access to information law, but there's all these exceptions the government can use to not release information. And that's sort of where they've been going with this. And they've said that they can't find some of this stuff. And it's just a whole mess. And it really makes it look like the government's hiding something when in fact that data and that information might not really be all that interesting. It's one of the, you never know until you get that sheaf of documents on your desk and go through it. It could be a great story or it could be absolutely nothing. But certainly a tense bit of a standoff there. And I think it's something that Albertans are still thinking about in my life anyways, probably yours as well, even if the government isn't talking a whole ton about it right now.
And it's created a lot of tension as well, hasn't it, between Alberta Premier Daniel Smith and Justin Trudeau and our finance minister as well, Chrystia Freeland, with the possibility of Alberta pulling out of the CPP.
It has, and with other premiers and other finance ministers in the provinces as well, who are looking at this and saying, well, if Alberta takes off with all this money, how do we keep the CPP solvent for all of our retirees in Ontario and Quebec and British Columbia? So I think it's really, even if it's really good for Alberta, it's certainly been very, very controversial elsewhere. And outside of Alberta, I don't think there are very many people who are in favor of this idea. So even if it moves forward, if it goes anywhere, it is going to be a matter of Alberta fighting a battle on, a dozen or so fronts against a lot of really unhappy people.
He's our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post. Tyler Dawson, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Thanks for having me, Hal.
Back in the early 1920s, while class prejudices and religious divisions were taking place in the United Kingdom, two young runners demonstrated an unyielding determination as they trained for the 1924 Paris Olympics. One ran to challenge those prejudices, while the other sought to glorify God through his athletic prowess. Now, this compelling narrative was beautifully illustrated in the 1981 British historical sports drama film Chariots of Fire, and is now being revisited by the creative team at Rosebud Theatre here in Alberta. Aaron Krogman is a board member of the Rosebud Fellowship and part of the cast of this very exciting project. Aaron, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks very much.
So how did your background in theatre at Rosebud School of the Arts really prepare you for this role at Chariots of Fire?
Well, it's a post-secondary professional theater training program, and I ate it up as a student in the 2000s. I came in 2004, and I've been doing shows. I think this is my 20th production for Rosebud Theatre, so I've done a fair few of them, and I feel like it's the thing I do. It's the thing I know to do and have trained to do and have practiced doing.
So Aaron, can you describe the unique challenges of portraying your character, Harold Abrahams, in Chariots of Fire?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge for me is the running. We're running on stage, we're running full out, and I'm not as young as I once was, and I got to take care of my joints and my knees because it's a long run. I think that's probably the foremost challenge that we've been working with and rising to. Yeah, it's been successful so far.
So do you have to carb up, maybe have a little bit of spaghetti or maybe some rice?
Well, actually, I've actually lost about 25 pounds since Christmas.
Wow.
I've been doing some running and a bit more just fitness and as a way to prep. If I'm carrying less weight, it's less hard on the joints.
So did your previous experience of performing the role of Jesus and the Canadian Badlands Passion Play really influence your performance?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a physically demanding, lots of running, moving, covering all kinds of ground. I think one time I mapped it out for the Passion Play. I do about 7 kilometers in a run through of the play, and it's elevation and running and all kinds of stuff. So in terms of the physical demands of Chariots of Fire, it feels really similar, but also a lot of Jewish context. My character, Harold Abrams, is Jewish and has that as his heritage. And Jesus also, is alive and at the time of lots of really interesting time in Jewish history. And so there's lots of overlap for sure.
Now, did the directors actually talk to you a little bit about the cardio that's involved with some of your roles here?
Yeah. I think they just assume that I'm up for it, but I would say that, I'm a dad. I have a couple girls that are pretty young, and most of my exercise in the last few years has been like fighting with car seats in the back seat, carrying kids. So getting my legs back in shape has been good, but I'm excited for it too.
So Aaron, what aspects of your character in Chariots of Fire really resonated with you the most?
I think it's the psychological aspect of high achievement that I think is really fascinating. These characters are driven to perform and to achieve and to win, to succeed, and whether they do or don't, is tricky, and it's a lot to navigate. And Harold in particular, he's motivated to, matter to his dad. He's got older brothers who are high level achievers, and he wants to matter to his dad. I think he feels like he doesn't. And that's a big piece of what's been really fascinating about exploring this character.
So, how did physically demanding roles like the one in Chariots of Fire impact your approach to being a performer?
In some ways, it takes so much of the focus. There are times when you do a role, and the thing you give all your attention to is the character, or the accent, or the some psychological aspect. But when you're like, how are my legs, are they going to be okay today? Are they going to hurt? It takes so much of your attention, and then the acting actually just becomes natural, and you don't overwork it, you don't worry it. You're paying attention to the immediate now of what's happening with your body, which is actually a great way to think about acting. And so I appreciate the physical aspect of it, because it helps you do your job better, I think.
So, during a theatrical run, do you kind of try and stay in character as much as you can, even when you're off set? Well, how does that really work for you? Are you able to just turn it off and on fairly quickly?
I think it's a little bit of both. This particular character that I'm playing, I'm busy the entire time. When I step off stage for a moment, it's maybe for a scene, and I've got a costume change. I'm getting ready for the next thing, so I'm very present mentally with Harold, what's happening for him, what's just happened, what's next, what he wants. It's a roller coaster that doesn't really leave me alone the entire run, and that's really exciting too. I love that aspect of getting to play Harold.
Some actors I've chatted with in the past say sometimes it's psychologically damaging, some of the roles that they take on, because they really put themselves into this character, learning more, doing the research of the character, and it really impacts their lives even long term. So let me ask you something. Can you talk about the psychological depth of your character and how you really prepared for it and how it's maybe impacted you personally?
I I agree that it can be challenging to navigate difficult emotional and psychological moments when you're playing characters. Um, I've done it enough times now, I guess, that I kind of trust it. I know what it is, and I know what it's like to move through big runs, long runs of plays, and spending a lot of time. And I think it's a little bit of the discipline of what you pay attention to. When we take breaks, we laugh a lot. We you swing into the lighter side of life, especially when you're dealing with stuff that's kind of heavy. And I think Harold is a role that it's there's a lot of heaviness in it, but at the same time, it's always an opportunity to explore what's true and what's alive for me. And I the question he gets asked over and over again is, why do you run? And the implication is that he doesn't know, and he's making a mess of his life because he doesn't know himself well enough. And it's an opportunity for me to ask myself the same question each time. Why do I do what I do? How well do I know myself? And so it's just a great platform for me to like grow as a human being every time I do it. I think that's part of how I navigate some of what can be difficult.
Did they ask the same question of Forrest Gump once? Oh no, they just yelled, "Run, Forrest, run!" That's what it was. That's right. Okay, Aaron, let's talk about one of the pivotal scenes here in your confrontation with Eric Little.
Yeah, I love that scene. These two guys have been battling, but it's almost like Harold wants to have a fight. It's like he's in the ring, wants to have a fight, and Eric, he's it's like he's a pacifist, and he actually cares more about Harold than Harold realizes. And I think what happens in that scene is that Harold realizes he's got a friend and someone who actually cares about him and sees him, and is the exact antidote to all the prejudice that he's been experiencing in his life. Eric really represents a brother in many ways, and I think that's where that really becomes apparent to Harold in that scene. He pushes and pushes, and Eric just is generous with him, and it's a beautiful thing. It's unexpected and beautiful, and it makes the difference for Harold, I think, in his big journey of letting go of all the stuff that he carries and is burdened by.
So, Aaron, let's talk a bit about your experience working with the director and the rest of the cats in Chariots of Fire.
Morris Ertman is the director. I've worked with him lots. He's been a huge part of my life as an artist. He's the director I've worked with more than anyone else, and I think this particular show really suits his style of directing. You know, and it's just been a blast. I love working with Morris. It's a known quantity for me, and yet it's always kind of challenging and interesting, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull it off, and yet it's a it's a really fruitful and alive rehearsal hall with Morris all the time. And I would say too, there's lots of new cast members to Rosebud Theater, people who are in Rosebud for the first time on a show, and you never know what you're going to get sometimes, like with us in-house people and then the newcomers. And I'm always a little bit nervous if they're going to like me and how it's going to go, but it's been such a great cast, like unbelievably great. I've been so blessed by it. I feel like it's a really warm, dedicated, professional, hardworking, lots of heart across the board, and it's been a great joy to be with them and to hit the deck every day with them.
That's wonderful to hear. Now, outside of all of the running, what were some of the other challenging aspects of your role in Chariots of Fire?
It's an accent show. Like it takes place in the UK, and there's lots of accents, and dialect is always kind of exciting to get to do, and I've really enjoyed that. I had to kind of pay attention to some of the pronunciations, and we want to make it clear for audiences too that that come, and you got to fill the house. There's Scottish accents, there's English accents, there's some American accents and that's really always, I love accent plays. It's always exciting to get to find that new voice and flavor, and it informs so much of the storytelling. So yeah, it's great for that too.
Give me your best Scottish brogue. Can you give me one?
Well, all right. I'll do my best, but I don't do Scottish in the play. I do British.
That's right,
so,
British. Okay.
I haven't been practicing Scottish, although sometimes when I'm in a scene with someone doing Scottish, it kind of like triggers me to
Does it
respond
rub off
in
on you,
Scottish.
maybe?
Yeah, but I try to fight that as best I can.
Okay, let's say
yeah.
you're from Liverpool, England. Give me a nice British accent.
Oh yeah. What do you think? What do you think of this accent? I don't know. Yes.
We'll order some kippers and bits. Now, what are your thoughts on the trend of adapting films like Chariots of Fire into stage plays, Aaron?
I think it's cool. I think it's challenging. I think people come with a bit of an expectation, and so you want to you want people to come away with their expectations met, or more than met, and that's the challenge and the hope. But I think my experience of the people who have come to see the play, like we're achieving that. My Uncle Tony came yesterday, and he just could not stop talking about how amazed he was by it, and he was in that kind of like afterglow. He just could not believe what he had seen in the theater, and that feels really great. People are like, how are they going to possibly do that on the stage? And they come with that question, and it gets answered in an amazing way. I love that.
How about some of the spiritual elements of the play and planting seeds for Christ along the way?
Well, I think that's happening in this play. Like we get to see Eric Liddell kind of live out following his convictions and his faith, in a challenging way. And in the end, it's a really fruitful thing, and I think who we are and the fruit we bear with the lives we live is measured in how well we love people around us. And I think that's what the play exemplifies, is that Eric Liddell loved people. He just put it into practice. He loves the person who should be his enemy in the play. He loves him. That's Harold. And I think sometimes there's a spectrum of like really explicit evangelism, and then really implicit. And I think on the storytelling side, where we tend towards the implicit in general, and this play it kind of rides the line between the two, and it does it in a really lovely way. It's nuanced. It's a play about running, but it's a play about what people believe, and it's about who they are, and I think it isn't always often that Christianity in media gets a fair shake, and it's sometimes too dimensionally maligned. And this play is not that. We get to see someone as a full human, three-dimensionally living out the challenge and opportunity of a faith-filled life, and that's Eric Little for sure.
Aaron Krogman is a board member of the Rosebud Fellowship and part of the cast of Chariots of Fire, which is running at the Rosebud Theatre until May 25th. Aaron, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.